Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Nun Aleph. We are at the top two dots in the second line of daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. And yesterday we saw that orphan daughters are fed only from real property and not from movable property. So today we begin with a case that is the exception that actually may even swallow the rule. So let's take a look at the first exception. So Hahu Yasam. So we're again Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, top two dots, second line, and again we dealt with yesterday with the concept of daughters being fed from real property, but now we're going to have a case where Rava was actually fed the daughter from movable property and the situation that was involved. So Hahu Yasam Yisoma Da'asu L'Kamei de Rava. So an orphan boy and girl came in front of Rava. So Amar Lahu Rava Halu Yasam B'Shvil Yisoma. So go and give more for the boy, and he'll take care of the girl. So Amri la Rabbanan la Rava, v'hamar hu da Amar mimikarkai v'lo metaltale, and obviously he had given them from metaltalin in order for the boy to feed to the girl. So as a result, and then so the rabbis all said to him, "How could you do that? Aren't you the one that said that you're supposed to feed from only, feed the daughter only from karka, from real property? So bein lemizone, bein leksuva, bein leparnasa, whether it's for the to feed the person, or for to fulfill the ksuba, or for the dowry. That in each of those cases you're supposed to use real property as a method for payment. And here, what have you done? You've used non-real property. You've used things that could be moved, possessions, and that's what you've given to them. It's like money. You've given them money in order to take care of them. And so as a result, how could you do that? It seems to be a contradiction to what you said previously. So Amar Lahu, Ilu Ratza Shivcha L'Shamsho. If the boy needed a servant, a maidservant, to take care of him, to help with the cleaning and the cooking and doing all the things around the house, because here he's a yasom, an orphan. So Milo Yavin, like, wouldn't we give for him money in order to give the person food and to pay for the person? So kol shekain hacha deika tarte. So now this sister, she's got a double role. She's of course going to help take care of the house, and so as a result, we should give him extra food so that he can be sure to furnish food. So again, this is obviously role gender stereotyping in terms of the roles, but the point is that Rava is enabling us to look outside and find other mechanisms of enabling the award, to say that, look, we can make it as if the woman is being hired by the estate, and so as a result, if we can create that kind of situation, so then we can escape the limitation of karka.
Maybe not everybody owned land too.
Oh, I'm sure you're absolutely right. Not everybody owned land. Of course that's true. I'm sure that's true. So yeah. So we want to try that. I mean, look, we ended yesterday with 3 different groups of people wanting to give from non-karka. So Rava is finally the one who's able to identify a mechanism to escape the karka limitation without going to, without just saying rachamim, right? And so as a result, he's created a situation where essentially we hire the person in order to do some work around the house and thereby ensure that they have food. Okay. So having dealt with that, so now the Gemara is going to quote Brisa that shows that the question of supporting daughters for movable property is actually a debate among Tanaim. So we have, throughout this, we've effectively given one perspective, and now we're going to share that in fact this is that there are Tanaim who disagree and say that in fact non-real property, movable property could also be used. So Tana Rabbanan, we have a Brisa. Whether you have real property, again, literally means that there's responsibility associated with it, meaning that that when you sell it to somebody, it is subject to all prior lending, etc., to be collected from. And then similarly, when it comes to things that do not have that responsibility, do not that do not travel with debts, with liens on them, namely movable property. Anything that's movable is considered owned in full. Motziin lemazon isha levanos divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe is the one who disagrees with the other opinion. And what's that other opinion? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. So he says that everything can be, for the sustenance of the wife and the daughters, as when the father dies. So that is everything is available to feed them. But Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer nechasim sheyesh lanachrayas, when it comes to real property, so motziin lebanos min abanim will take away from the sons in order to feed the daughters, namely that that's to provide food and dowries for them. But v'labanos min habanos, and will take away real property from adult daughters if there are no sons. So all the daughters are inheriting, and there are younger daughters who haven't yet gotten their inheritance. So we'll take away from them in order to give them their inheritance as well. Vilabanim min abanim, and older sons again to younger sons in order to ensure that everybody gets their share of the inheritance. Vilabanim min abanos min achasim merubim, and when you have enough property that there's enough food for the daughters, well then, if there's enough food for the daughters and the daughters had come and taken all the inheritance, well then we'll take the proper amount of the inheritance away from them with respect to real property, because if there's enough to feed the daughters during the time that they are minors until they become a bogrot, so then we'll take away from them anything extra to give to the sons, because the sons are the ones who inherit and not the daughters. Okay. But if there isn't enough in order to ensure that the women get to eat, so then, as we saw earlier, that when it's a question of who's going to be forced to go around to beg for food, we'll make the boys beg and not the girls. All right, now what about when there is no real property? So that was all real property. So, but when it comes to nechasim she'ein laha machrayas, motziin labanim min abanim, when it comes to inheritance, of course, we have to take care of that. So if the older sons had inherited and taken everything, and now the younger sons are becoming mature, and so we need to make sure that they have their assets, that distribution needs to be equitable. Vilabanos min abanos, and similarly, if there are no sons and all the inheritance is going to daughters, we need to make sure that also gets distributed equally. Vilabanim min abanos, and we'll take away from the daughters for the inheritance of sons if in fact they took from non-real property, because they don't get any of the non-real property once there are sons involved, any of the movable property. But we will not take away from the sons for the daughters when it comes to movable property. So now usually, if you have Rebbe arguing with one additional person, we say that the halacha is like Rebbe when he's arguing with one person. But halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. But here the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who made the distinction between the real property and the non-real property case. Because Rava himself has specifically ruled that the halacha is that we take from karka and not from metaltalin, not from movable property. Bein l'ksuva, bein l'mazone, bein b'lefarnasa. Whether it's for the ksuva, when the wife ksuva, or for the sustenance, meaning for the in order to feed the daughters and the wife, or bein l'parnasa, or to ensure a dowry for the daughters. And of course, actually, we also saw when it says ksuva, it could even be the ksuva for the boys, if in fact the husband had promised to ensure that there was a minimum inheritance that was going to go to the sons of this particular wife, that also would only be from real property. So, okay, so now we get to our next Mishnah. And so in the next Mishnah, we had previously noted that the minimum for a ksuva, for a virgin, is 200 zuz, while a widow collects 100. So now this Mishnah is going to detail how this and other conditions apply to a ksuva. So lo kasav la ksuva. If in fact the man did not write a ksuva that he was supposed to write, well, bisula gova masayim. It doesn't make a difference. The virgin bride gets to take her 200 zuz, mana, and a widow gets to take her 100. Because effectively the courts have instituted this as a prerequisite, as a condition in any marriage, and so it doesn't make a difference whether it's written in a ksuba or not. Well, what happens if he doesn't write the full amount? What happens if he only promises to pay a lesser amount? What happens if he writes to his wife a field that is only worth 100 rather than a 200 zuz? Because obviously we're talking about somebody who is a betula. And the low cost of la kol nechasim to isli achrayin l'chsuvasech. And he does not write that all the properties that I own are pledged for your ksuba. So he doesn't put on himself a lien. We, in fact, in our ksubas, we even say that the lien goes on everything, even on the shirt off the person's back, that the husband says that he will make sure to take care of his wife, even giving her the shirt off of his back. Well, chayiv, then he is going to be obligated to pay the 200 zuz. Shuhu tanai basin, because again, we have this concept that this is a condition of the basin. The courts have instituted this condition to every marriage, and here he has tried to cheap things out. That is not acceptable. Okay, so those are the two main cases. Now we have other cases. Lo kasav la im tishtaba'ai af kirnach v'osvinach li into. If he did not write into the ksuba that if you become a captured, I will redeem you and I will return you to be my wife. Or when it comes to a kohen, where the kohen can't return her to be his wife, because even if she was violated against her will, he's not allowed to go back to marrying her. I'm going to at least redeem you and bring you back to your city, to your father's home. So chayiv, even if he didn't write these things in the contract, he is obligated, because shehu tanai based in. Again, these are conditions that the court has instituted for all marriages. So nishbes chaya lifdusa, if in fact she was captured and now it's time for the ransom, and the question is, the guy says, what does he say? V'im amar, and now he says, haregita uksubasa v'tivdes asma. Here's your divorce decree and your ksuba. I want nothing to do with you. Use your own money to redeem yourself. No good. Eino rashai. He's not allowed. So because the bottom line is that he is not allowed to avoid his obligation to take care of his wife, and part of those obligations is to redeem her. And because we don't want any women to not be redeemed, we're going to make it a fundamental right that cannot be
So,
abandoned.
David, why do we need a ketubah if it's all Tanai Beit Din?
Because what we've just discussed is the minimum amount, and you can institute a greater amount, and indeed our ksuba doubles these amounts in
But
order.
let's say you just wanted to do the minimum. You really wouldn't need a ketubah because it would all be Tanai Beit Din.
Well, there are a number of advantages to having a ketubah. One is that it will indicate whether or not you've paid, because you'll have a written document that you will get, and you'll be able to collect from, in order to ensure that and it protects the woman to enable her to be able to collect.
If there was no ketubah, she could still collect because she could just go to Beit Din.
Well, it becomes much more problematic because maybe he'll claim that he had already paid it.
If there's nothing in writing, there's nothing to be held accountable for.
No, you're on mute. You're on mute.
How does the ketubah show that she's been paid?
Because it's like a check, right? If you hold the check, so then you know that you can bring it for payment to the spouse. And so if
you would stamp it or something like that.
Exactly. I think it's actually given to the husband, as part of the divorce, that the wife gives it, or I can't remember whether it's formally cut up or it's marked, but the bottom line is that it's like a check that's marked paid. It's going to go from being unmarked to being marked, and thereby, and so that's why, in our lives, the wife is supposed to be the one who's responsible for the ksuba. It's not, the husband should not take it and put it into a lockbox. It's the wife that should take it and put it into a lockbox. Okay.
So if the ketubah is invalid, like he wrote the wrong amounts, it doesn't invalidate the marriage, though, right? I mean,
no, it does not invalidate the marriage. Correct. That is correct. And that's effectively what we had earlier, that if he wrote 100, even if it's real property, that may be worth 200 to her, but it's the value in the society is worth 100. That is not enough. She gets a full 200.
Right.
Now,
if the adim or if there are other elements that were puzzle or something like that,
that would be something different. If the witnesses are puzzled, then that could actually affect the marriage.
Why? Because it's the ketubah.
Oh, the witnesses on the ketubah are yes. The witnesses on the ketubah would not affect the marriage. It's the witnesses at the marriage ceremony itself that would affect the marriage.
But you're right. Validity of the ketubah, it wouldn't matter because she could just say Tanai Beit Din.
Correct. That's right. Now, she wouldn't get the full amount in her ketubah, but but that's exactly right.
She would still get the minimum.
She would still get the minimum. Exactly. So laksa chayav. Now, what about the following? If she gets ill, chayav l'raposa, then she's obligated to heal her. However, because healing, so we'll take a look at Rashi in a moment. So let's do that. So Amar, however, if he says, Hare gita, here is your get, uksubasa, and the ksuba that you're owed, tirape et atzma, you go heal yourself, rashai. He is allowed to do that. So chayav liraposa, if we take a look in Rashi, second to last Rashi in the Mishnah, sheharifua kemizonos, because healing is part of the obligation, according to Rashi, of the obligation to feed. And Rashai she'ein adam chayav l'zon grusha. So just as you're not obligated to feed your divorcee, you're not obligated to heal your divorcee. And so as a result, you are allowed to divorce your wife if, in fact, she is ill and you want her to heal herself. Not a particularly nice thing to do, but it is something that is would seem to be permitted. Okay, now our Gemara is going to begin by attempting to identify the author of our Mishnah. And the problem is that we're going to see that the first line of our Mishnah, and I had them lined up, so I'll just keep this up. The first one is that if there's no ketubah, the woman collects 200 and a widow collects 100. And the second line, that if the guy writes a field worth 100 and failed to write all properties I own are pledged for your ketubah, he is still liable for the 200. So those two lines we're going to see don't fit with anyone perfectly. So let's take a look. So the Gemara begins, okay, money, who is it that is the person who taught the first rule in our Mishnah? Rebbe Meir, it's Rebbe Meir. Anybody who tries to do less than 200 for a virgin and 100 for a widow, that is not appropriate. That is like it's a non-marital cohabitation. It's promiscuous and inappropriate. Rebbe Yehuda, because if you say that it was Rebbe Yehuda, Yesh behen, Rebbe Yehuda, Ha'amar, he says, Ratza kosev libesula shtar masayim. If he wants to, he can write a 200 contract for a besula. V'hi koseves his kabalti mimchamana, and she can write that she has received 100, and thereby only be owed 100. Ula almana mana v'hi koseves his kabalti mimcha chamishim zuz. And if he wants to only owe 50, so then he can write a contract of 100, and she could write back that she has already received 50. So it doesn't fit, meaning it seems like the contract that we're talking about, where he writes 100, would be permitted according to Rebbe Yehuda, and yet so that doesn't seem to work. So, but Ema Seifa. I'm sorry, so we haven't yet gotten to the second line. So Ema Seifa. So now, what about the second statement in our Mishnah? The statement about the fact that he wrote a lesser amount. Kasav lasada shavimana takas ma'asayim zuz. The low kasav kol la kol nechasim to isli achrayin l'ksubaseh. And he did not write that everything that I have is pledged to you. Chayav. He is nonetheless obligated. Shehu Tanai Basin, because it's a Tanai of Basin, it's condition of Basin. So Asan Rebbe Yehuda, that has to be according to Rebbe Yehuda. The Amar Achrayus To Soferhu. If you omit the fact that you are guaranteeing with all of your property, or namely all of your real property, your obligations under the ksuba, that is considered as if it was written in. Because the Rebbe Meir ha'amar achrayus lav to soverhu, because Rebbe Meir is the one who says that if you omit the fact that a term of a written contract is guarantee payment from my real property, that can't be Rebbe Meir, because the Tanan, if we have this Mishnah, this is this Mishnah in Baba Metzia, matzah shtaricho. Let's say a person finds a shtar chov. I find on the street a check. Okay, im yesh behen achrayas nechasim. If in fact there is a lien on that in the contract, in the debt contract, then you're not allowed to return it. Lo yaksler shebeistin nifrain mehen, because we're worried that the Basin is going to use it to collect from property, as we turn to Nun Aleph Bet, is going to collect from property that was sold. So let's give some names and an example. So I am going to be the creditor, and I'll be the debtor, and I wrote a contract that I owe James $50, and after the date on that contract, I sold a property worth $50 to Stan. Now, if James did not lose that contract and I have no money in order to pay James back, James has the right to take that contract and take that debt contract and collect the property from Stan that I sold to him. Okay. But now let's say that James lost that contract. Okay. Because we're not sure whether it was James that lost that contract or me that lost that contract, because it would involve enabling James to take that property away from Stan, we can't just give it back to him, because maybe he already collected the money. All right. But if in fact that contract did not enable James to collect the money out of the property that I sold to Stan, because it did not have that right, well then then I can return it to James, because then when you find it, Mark, you can return it to James, because you can be sure that if in fact that he's not going to be able to engage in any funny business. So, but yeah, well, potentially, but if I say that it was I that lost it, and I bring proof that witnesses that I paid you back, then I would be okay. But if I don't, it's because you're supposed to give me the contract and I lost the contract rather than ripping it up. So that's on me to correct. It's protect Stan. That's exactly right. So Divrei Rebbe Meir, that's what Rebbe Meir says, because Rebbe Meir does not assume that every written contract has a guarantee in it. But the Chachamim disagree, and this includes Rebbe Yehuda. Echad zeh ve'echad zeh lo yachzer. They say, no, you can never return it, because according to the Chachamim, every written contract doesn't make a difference whether it says it explicitly in the contract, but or it's just implicit. It has an implicit condition that you can collect, that James will be allowed to collect from real property that has been sold after the date on that contract. Because because again, even though it's not written in the contract, the James will be allowed to use it to collect from Stan. So Reisha Rebbe Meir, the Sefer Rebbe Yehuda. So now we have in our Mishnah, the Reisha is Rebbe Meir, because the beginning says that you can never have less than 200 and 100, and Rebbe Yehuda says you can, and Rebbe Meir is the one who says you can't. And the Sefer is Rebbe Yehuda, because the second piece said that even if you fail to write all properties I own are pledged to you, it seems like we're reading into the contract a pledge. So what's the story? So I might think, so answer number one is the following. Maybe we'll say that everything is Rebbe Meir, Rebbe Meir ben Ksuba l'shtaret. And maybe we can say that a regular contract, the contract that like I did with James, where I owe him money, is different from the contract, from a Ksuba contract. But umishani lai, but does in fact Rebbe Meir say they're different? No, he does not say that they're different. Vahatanya chamisha govin min hachororin. There are 5 kinds of people who, as creditors, they are going to collect only from unsold property, not from sold property, meaning they don't have a lien. The eluhain peiros ushvach peiros. That if you have cases of produce or improvement for produce, or somebody who has to feed his son or the daughter of his wife, the son or the daughter of his wife. The get chov she'ein bo achrayus, or a contract, a debt contract that doesn't have a guarantee written on it. And the one that we care about is this last one. Uksubat isha she'ein ba'achrayis, or a ksuba that doesn't have a guarantee in it. So it seems that Rebbe Meir applies his rule of not reading in a guarantee into a written document in all situations. So man shamet le da'amar achrayis lav to soferhu. So who did we hear that says that the absence of a guarantee in a contract is not an oversight? That's Rebbe Meir. So v'ketani ksubas isha, and we have a brisa that refers to ksubas isha. So clearly, this brisa is Rebbe Meir, and as a result, it can't be that the answer to our explanation of our Mishnah is that Rebbe Meir differentiates between a ksuba and other contracts. So our Mishnah seems to be the first line is according to Rabbi Meir, and the second line is according to Rabbi Yehuda. So we're going to answer Ibai Yisem and Rabbi Meir, but Ibai Yisem and Rabbi Yehuda. Actually, we could say it goes according to either one, and let's see how we can fit them both in. Yes.
You could collect from me in the scenario you painted.
Right.
Let's say I sold the property.
That's a good question. I'm
I-
not 100% sure, but I believe that it
It's not in my
runs
possession.
with the
Yeah,
property.
so if you don't
It
want
runs with the
indefinitely,
property. That's right.
in
So
theory, at least.
correct, exactly. That if you sell it to somebody else, it continues to run
Down
with
the
the
line.
property down the line. Exactly. That's
So
my
what-
understanding.
Yeah.
So the point is that yeah, that's a good question. It was in question. So the point is that if I owe $50 in a written contract to James, and it says in that contract that all my property is he can collect from, and then after I write that contract, I sell the property to Stan, and then Stan sells it to Mark.
Right.
So James will
collect
be
from
able
Mark.
to collect from Mark, even though
Right.
because Mark is obligated to do due diligence on the
Does it work
property.
like that today in civil law?
Absolutely.
You can go down the line.
The main concept, effectively, the lawyers for Mark would never let Mark buy the property from you
Right,
because of the liens. They would do a lien search that, and by the way, just to be clear, today, the way it isn't just enough to be, in those days, a written contract was something unique because not everybody could write, not everybody could read. And so people knew that a contract was written between me and James. Today, in order to make sure that that publicity exists, the government runs essentially a database of properties that are to where you file your lien. So exactly. And so as a result, before you purchase it from me, you look and see what liens exist against the property. And so if I hire it doesn't even have to be that James is my mortgage provider. James could be my contractor, and he would have a contractor's lien on my property. Again, he would need to file that paperwork with the court in order to get that done. So, but the bottom line is that I believe that it goes on. Okay, so
David, what
yeah.
this idea of ta'ut sofer, right?
Yeah,
Going back to
correct. The question is whether
what does that mean? That
So-
means we will interpret it as a mistake.
the way I understand it is a little bit. As usually I try to understand things in sort of the simplest way possible, and the way I'm understanding is that basically a written contract by definition has a lien in it. It creates that guarantee. That's the reason that you did it that way, and so as a result, we're going to just assume that every written contract has a lien in it.
So it's not really a mistake.
Correct. It's not really a mistake. It doesn't make you could go and ask. It's not as if you could go, if, for example, if you went and asked the sofer and said, did you accidentally omit it? And he says, no, I purposely omitted it.
Right.
It doesn't make a difference. The chachamim won't care.
Right. That's
Okay.
right.
So that's how I'm understanding it. I'm not 100% sure, but that's how I'm understanding it.
That has to be the right interpretation.
It is exactly. Okay, so now again, we're going to say that actually we can say our Mishnah is either all Rabbi Yehuda or all Rabbi Meir. So Ibai is Rabbi Yehuda. If you want, you can say that it is all Rabbi Yehuda because Hasam kasva lehiskabalti. Why is it that in the case the woman that Rabbi Yehuda allowed the woman to get less than the 200 or the 100? It was because she specifically wrote a document that said, I already accepted 100. So the point is that you need a written waiver. It's not as if the man has the right to write a lower ksuva. He has that right only if the woman writes a waiver. But hacha lo kasva lahiskabalti. the case that we're talking about out in our Mishnah is where she did not write a waiver, and so as a result, if he writes a lesser amount, even in connection with real property, we will allow her to collect the full 200. And Ibai is saying a Rebbe Meir, and if you want, you can say that this is all Rebbe Meir. Because my chayev de katani, when we said chayev, we understood the fact that when the case in our Mishnah said, and he failed to write that there was a lien on all his property, that there was a guarantee, we understood that we were, and then we said chayev, we understood that the chayev meant that there was a real guarantee, and she could collect even for property that was sold. But no, my chayav de katani, what is the chayav that we learned about in our Mishnah? Mina mechorin. It only means stuff that is not sold. So she does not, in fact, have the lien against the property, and it's just an obligation. She's owed the full 200, but she doesn't get to collect it from things that were not that are no longer in the possession of the husband. Okay, so lo kasavla. So now the next case was our Mishnah referenced the ability of a woman in captivity to return to her non-Kohen husband, which triggers this is going to trigger one of the most troubling pieces of Gemara, where it's suggested that even if a woman is coerced to have marital relations, she may consent in the end and therefore be prohibited to return to her husband. But in my understanding is that I don't think we paskin that way. So Amar Avua de Shmuel said, Eishes Yisrael shene'ensa. When it comes to a Jew who is, now again, our Mishnah referenced that that there's an obligation to redeem the wife and even return her if the guy's not a Kohen, return her as his wife that's implicit in any marriage. So Avua de Shmuel says, Eishes Yisrael shenansa, if you have a woman, a Jewish woman who is married to a non-Kohen, who is violated, Asura Lavala, she's prohibited to go back to her husband. Because we're concerned that even though the beginning of the relationship, the beginning of the violation was against her will, at the end, maybe she agreed to it. So Eisvei Rav Avua de Shmuel. So Rav asks the Shmuel's father, how could you say that? Our Mishnah seems to specifically say that not that way, because what did we say? That one of the things that are effectively implicitly in every ksuba is that if you're captured, I'm going to ransom you and return you to me as my wife. So so the father of Shmuel was silent. Kari Rav alei Avua de Shmuel, and so Rav said, with respect to the father of Shmuel, Sarim Atsu b'milim v'chav yasimu lefihem, that ministers would withhold their words and place their hands to their mouth. So he didn't have anything to say. So my Islay Lameimar. But what could he have said? So the answer is, the Gemara answers on behalf of Avua de Shmuel, B'shvuya hekilu, that what is our Mishnah talking about? Our Mishnah is not talking about an onus case, a violation case. It's talking about a woman who was captured. And because, as Rashi explains, 8 lines up in the narrow lines, B'shvuya hikilu, shelo re'inua shenivala, v'chi ka'amar ihun benivala. And that when it comes to a captive, we don't know whether the woman was violated. But here, in the case where we know that she was violated, that's where Shmuel's father made his statement. Well, Avua de Shmuel onus de Sharia Rachmana hechi mishkachasla. Well, in that case, the Torah itself recognizes that there are certain situations where a woman could be violated and able to go back to her husband. So where is that? What kind of situation is that talking about? So kagon de ka'amri edim shetzavcha mitchila v'adso, because we're talking about a situation where she was crying out from the very beginning until the end. Ufliga de Rava, and this all argues on Rava. Kol, meaning and Shmuel's father argues on Rava, because what does Rava say? Kol shetchila sa ba'ones v'sof b'ratzon. Even in a case where initially it seems like it was against her will, but in the end, it seems to be with her consent. Afilu hi omeres hinichuli. Even if she were to say about the person who engaged in the violation, that says don't do anything to him, she'omale nizkak la socharto, that if he hadn't done this against my will, I would have gone and hired him. Muteres, she is nonetheless permitted to go back to her husband. My taima yetzer arbosha. Why do we allow her, even if afterwards she is happy that it happened to her? Again, very, like I said, very troubling Gemara. So yetzer arbosha, because it's her yetzer hara that has clothed her effectively and made her unable to control her desires. Yes, well, we're going to get even more into Stockholm Syndrome right now. 100%, absolutely. I even have that written on my screen. You will see, that I reference the Stockholm Syndrome for the next piece of the Gemara. So Tanya Kavasa.
The thing is, like, it assumes that the only way to express your objection is to scream.
Yes, correct.
I mean, which is way.
I would assume that if you were crying the entire time, also.
I understand, but I'm sure there are other ways.
100%. It's not. I guess I introduced this by saying that this is.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying that what the evidence of Ratzon is.
Correct. 100% correct. Yeah. So Tanya Kavasi the Rava, we actually have a support for Rava, and so I like I said, thankfully the halacha is not like Abu the Shmuel. I don't believe that we require that, but okay. So the Hilo Nispasa, what does it mean that she was not forced? That's so that's that's the situation where an adultery, in a case of adultery, if she was not forced, this is in the discussion of the Sota, and we talk about she not being forced. Well, then Asura, she's prohibited to her husband. Hanispasa muteris. Therefore, if she was forced, she's permitted. And you have another case, even though she was not forced, muteris, where she's still permitted. What's the case where she was not forced and she was permitted? In any case where even in the beginning it was with coercion, but in the end it was with a consent, so we'll allow it as well. Tanya Edith, we have another case along the same lines. The Hilon is basa. So again, we're going to try have other teachings from this verse. She was not forced. What does that teach? Asura, that then she's prohibited. So ha nispasa muteris, if she was forced, then she's permitted. The Yeshla Acheres sha'af al pisha nispasa. We have another case where a woman was forced, Asura, but she's still prohibited. The Ezo, Ashes Cohen. That's an Ashes Cohen. So an Ashes Cohen, even though she was forced, is not allowed to return to her husband. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Mashum de Rav Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, in the name of Rav Shmuel, the Hilon is pasuk, again, same pasuk. Asura, again, she's prohibited. Hanis b'sa muteris. But if she was forced, then she's permitted. Yeshla acheres, there's another case. Sha'af al pisha lonis pasa, even though she's not forced, muteris, she is permitted. Ve'ezo, what case is that? She kedusha taos, where there was a mistake in the marriage. This is a very complicated issue. We're just going to touch on it, but bottom line is where there was some kind of mistake in the marriage. So ashafilu benam murkav al kseifa, even if there's evidence of the marriage, but there was a mistake in the nature of the marriage, some contractual issue or some witnesses issue, some kind of mistake in the marriage, so they're not formally married, or so then in that case she's able to simply walk away. And so as a result, even though she was not forced, even though she had an affair, because the first marriage was not a valid marriage, so as a result that will not prevent her from being married even to that first husband, because the only situation where you cannot go back and marry your first husband after having relations with somebody else is if you're actually married to that person. If you're not actually married to that person, so then that prohibition doesn't.
Even a Cohen, right? She could even marry a Cohen.
Yes, she could even marry a Cohen. Exactly. She's not considered divorced. So absolutely. All right. So so now we get to the Stockholm Syndrome. So I'm sorry that James is going to miss this, but in any event, so Amar of Yehuda, Hani Nashe de Ganvu Ganavi. When you had women that were kidnapped by bandits, Sharyan Leguvrayu, they were permitted to their husbands. So Amri La Rabbanan Rav Yehuda, Vahakamantinan Lahu Naama. 1 sec. So, but what happens if they bring their captors bread? How do we, how do we know that they are doing that against their will? Maybe it shows that they are allowed, that they are want to be there, and therefore they should be treated like consistent with Avuah de Shmuel. So Machmas Yira. So again, they're only doing it out of fear. But 1 second, though maybe the women are giving the arrows to the bandits, meaning they're helping them fight. So again, Machmas Yira, that is also out of fear. So Vadai, however, should it certainly would be the case. Shabkinu va'azlan munavshaihu hasirin. The only situation that we're going to say that they're prohibited to go back to their husbands is if they actually leave their husbands and go back to the bandits. Then that would be a case of Stockholm syndrome that we would say, sorry, yes, it may be Stockholm syndrome, but we're not going to allow the woman to go back.
Mhm.
All right. So Tanarabanan, more along these lines, Shvuye Malchus Harehen Kishvuyin. If you've got captives of a monarchy, a king captures somebody, so they're considered captives like other kinds of bandit captives. Genuve Listus Enan Kishvuyin. However, if you're captured by bandits as opposed to formal, captors, then that's also not like ordinary captives. And then therefore, so in the first case, they're going to be permitted to their husband, and in the second case, they're going to be prohibited. But 1 second, but there is another teaching where it's the exact opposite, meaning we have one brisa that says wives get to return to their husbands when captured by kings, but not by bandits, and another brisa that says that the women get to return to their husbands when they're captured by bandits, but not by kings. So Malchus al Malchus lo kasha. So okay, so we're going to explain why the two references to kingships are not inconsistent. Haba Malchus Achashverosh, Haba Malchus ben Netzar. When it comes to a king like Achashverosh, who's a major king, a king over a whole region of the world, well then no woman who's captured is going to realistically think that she has any prayer of being married to this guy. And so as a result, she is not going to agree to anything. She is going to be an unwilling participant. But Haba Malchus ben Netzar, when it comes to ben Netzar, he is a ruler over a smaller territory, and he took rulership by force. So he actually may think that, I'm going to take this woman by force, and she's going to be happy, and I'm going to end up, and maybe I'll even marry her. And so as a result, the woman might think that she has a prayer of becoming married to the king. And so as a result, she will agree to the desire situation and actually be a willing participant. And so as a result, we're going to say that she is prohibited. So
it's like the difference between a king and a warlord or something.
Exactly. So the warlord is going to be problematic. And so what about listus al listus lo kasha? And similarly, when it comes to bandits, it depends on the nature of the bandit. The Ben Netzar kind of bandit, the warlord guy, exactly. So then we're going to be worried that the woman is going to agree to it. And so as a result, she'll be prohibited to go back to her husband. But balistim de alma. But when we're talking about regular bandits, so then she could go back to her husband, because of course they are so disgusting that nobody would want to be married to them. And so as a result, she is not going to want to engage in willing relations, because she is going to have no thought of being considered part of that connection. All right, so Ben Netzar. Now, 1 second, we mentioned Ben Netzar both as a bandit and as a king. Hasam Karele Melech. Once we called him a king, and there you called him a bandit. So in fact, yes, Gabe Achashverosh listimhu. When it comes to Achashverosh, he is considered like a bandit. Gabi listim de alma melachu. But when you compare him to an ordinary bandit, well, then he's not a bandit. Then he's like a king. And so as a result, that is, the Ben Nature character is the situation where we won't allow the woman to go back because we'll be concerned. Now, it's
he's the top warlord.
The warlord is the bad situation.
He's the top warlord.
The top warlord, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so stay tuned tomorrow as we're going to see whether the obligation to redeem a wife also will apply to a wife who a husband is not allowed to be married to. So, for example, a widow is married to the Kohen Gadol and now becomes captured. Does the Kohen Gadol have an obligation to redeem her? So to find out the answer to that question, stay tuned tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom. Again, hopefully Ellie will be leading us tomorrow, and that will be an hour before Mincha in the second floor Beit Midrash.
Okay, I will be away next week, and then school starts, so I may be on like one more day or something, but it's been fun.
All right, well, we will definitely miss you, Hanan. I don't suppose that there's another time that we could do this during the day.
No.
All right.
Don't.
We'll look forward to the next time you have a break.
Right. The list team. So they're saying there's more chance that they couldn't go back if it was list team because maybe they could connect with them or something. Would be
well, in each case, it ends up being the Ben Natsar situation. So when the person is the captor is a sufficient ruler, such that we're worried that maybe the woman might think that she has a prayer of becoming the person's wife. So then and ruling with him. So that's the situation where we say that she can't go back to her husband. But a regular bandit or a king, in all those situations, if the guy's a manuvel, disgusting, so
I thought it was about like, evidence of like ratzon, like with a king, like you have no choice. You're just a. No,
the ratzon here is, if you take a look in the Rashis, you'll see that the ratzon here is definitely with the question of, does she have an opportunity to potentially become something more and be part of the leadership.
Right. I mean, like those girls that were captured in Africa and stuff like that, like the 300 girls, remember?
Yes, exactly. So like the 300 girls, I would say that the people who did the capturing are so disgusting, etc. None of them are gonna think of that. But maybe the leader of if the leader of that group were to take one of them in, and then you would be concerned about
that girl might have
that girl might have problems going back to her husband. God forbid.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Be well. Have a great day.